Okay, I want to take the time to welcome you guys to week 2 of Introduction to Corrections. And week 2, 9 more to go after this. Plus, trust me, before you know it, the quarter will be over. And June 15th is the last day. So it may seem like far off because today is April the 11th. But trust me, it goes very, very, very fast. And before you know it, we'll be at that particular point. So make sure that you are, keeping up with the assignments, and make sure that you um, see if you want to log in. Make sure to activate audio. Yeah, activate audio, because if you don't activate audio, you won't hear what I am saying. So at any rate, I'm going to uh, get right into the module, share my screen. Let's make sure I got, okay. So I'm going to share my screen, and there it is. And so now you are able to see the screen from the course homepage. And again, I've gone over the information about reaching out to me. And so I'm going to go on all the way down to recordings. Our lecture today is week 2. So then we'll have lectures week 4, 6, 8, and 10. And then down here, you can see the open house. Here's the link here. If you wanted to click on that, you just copy and paste it and click it onto your browser. And if you can't see the open house, and the open house is critical. I've had to point out to a few students who asked me questions already about the project. Some have asked me about the project assignment that's due this week, and I'm going to go over that, but I did cover that during the open house. So we're going to spend some time, of course, going over the assignments for the week, and I will cover that. It's not a real involved assignment, but it's important that you get it done. I did stress during week 1 that you go ahead and get started with it right away. So anyway, let's look at the announcements over here for this week. Sentencing and the correctional process. Read section 4 of the text, and complete the activity sentencing issues and sentencing definitions. And then your discussion post, goals and philosophy of sentencing, which was due on Tuesday night, last night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you haven't submitted it as of today, it is late and you're going to lose at least 1 point. And then on Saturday, your reply post is due concerning the topic of goals and philosophy of sentencing. And then your written assignment, determinate or indeterminate sentencing, and then your course project selection of agency / contact person. And we're going to talk about that in detail in just a few minutes. And then my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. I've explained that in detail in the open house. So now let's take a look at the course calendar. Let me move this a little bit. Let's see how I move it. Here we go. Move. Here we go. So let's take a look at the calendar again. And the course calendar puts us right here. The reading assignment, of course, if you click on it, it'll open it up, and it'll tell you what section to read, same as what was in the announcement. It tells you about your initial post, about the live lecture. Somebody once asked me how do they find the link. If they can't, click on this, and there it is, right there. All you have to do is copy and paste all the way over to Richard Wright. Make sure you don't get that period in there, and then that will tell you. Okay, and then we go for about an hour, and then your reply post, and then your written assignments, which are due, and you'll see in the assignment when we get to it that there's a feature and it reminds you when it's due, and if you submit it after that due date, it's going to let me know right away that it's late, so when I start to grade your paper. But your written assignment, and it tells you what the requirements are, but remember the rubric is going to be very critical in terms of that. And then it tells you too about your course project, the requirements in Module 2, and the rubric. So we're going to go over that in just a few minutes. And that's it. And then next week, which we don't have a lecture, you follow this process, and then you do these things. There is a quiz that's coming up week 3. I remind students, as I told the student already about week 1, try to do your quizzes at the end after you've gone over all the material, and it's very beneficial because our next live lecture after today is not going to be until the 25th. So on the 25th, we will have our next live lecture. Okay. So now let's go back. Okay, so we're back at the course homepage. So now let's get right into Module 2. Move this over, back over. Here we go. So let's look at the assignments again. Once again, you can find your assignments. And it tells you in a 2-page paper, do the following 2 things. And it tells you, first, research the state in which you reside and report if your state uses determinate or indeterminate sentence structure. Now, of course, you're going to have to explain what those are, so in order to know which one to as well. Include the basis or philosophy of your state's process, indeterminate or determinate. Second, argue which of these 2 types of sentencing opinions you believe is more effective and why, regardless of what your state does. And so you're going to make sure you have citations and references. Now, again, when you do the assignment, when you click on it, you're going to see 2 things up at the left-hand corner. One, you're going to see the due date, which is April 15th. And as I said before, if your assignment is not submitted by 11:59 p.m. on the 15th, the computer's automatically going to put in your assignment whenever you put it in as late. It's going to say late next to it. 25 points are possible, and then according to the way I grade is you're going to see the rubric. And the rubric tells you how you get your points. 15 points for doing this, all of the things that it says in here. 5 points for doing all the things in here. Now, keep in mind that I run your papers through Grammarly to check your papers to make sure that you don't have grammatical issues, but primarily to check your critical thinking and to make sure that you don't have a high Grammarly percentage. Each of you have a Grammarly account, so you can run your papers through it. So if you did this and this, you'd have 20 points. Then APA citations. If you don't have the citations right, and if you use Wikipedia, or if you use Wikipedia as a resource or unreliable source or not credible source, the most credible sources are found in our Library and Learning Center location, but you can find them in other places too, but they got to be credible. and then you will lose 5 points. So let's assume that you do one of these things wrong. APA means title page, reference page, proper spacing, paragraph indenting, and also you have to have a cover sheet, which is also important as well. So then let's say you did this, then you'll get 20 points. And you'll know that 20 points lowers your grade. So I'm going to let you know when I grade, I'm going to be looking to see if you did all of these things. And that's how I'm going to grade you. So you should be able to check yourself and see that as well to get all of your points. Right? Now, that's the written assignment. Okay. So then I go back now. The other assignment that's in there, of course, your discussion post, you already know how that works. Then you got the same thing with selection of course project. It says for your course project, in a paragraph or two, describe the agency you've selected for the project. Include a sentence or two as to why you selected the agency. Then include another paragraph identifying the person you will interview and their contact information. So when you made the initial contact, you should have the opportunity to demonstrate that transferable skill of communication by communicating with them using appropriate audience, tone, and vocabulary. So this is your assignment that's done. Now, there's a rubric that goes with that. Again, this is due Sunday, 15 possible points. Okay? So under the assignment itself, you can look at the rubric. And the rubric clarifies what you have to do. Student asked me already, what do I can't understand what I'm supposed to do. It's in the rubric, it's in the module, and I'd also discussed it in the open house. And so these are the things that you have to do for this assignment. And this is basically the same language from the module in itself. And then your citations and references and things like that that are in there, which you won't have to worry about that too much, but you want to make sure that you have proper spacing and those kind of things, paragraph indents and so forth and so on. And so you get 15 points for satisfying all of these. So if you do this well and this well, you're going to have 12, but you're going to lose either 3 points, depending on what it is. I can take up to 3 points away. I can take only 1 of the points away. I don't do half points. I can take up to 10 points away. So you could get 5 for doing some of this when I read to see if you satisfied the quality, content, and accuracy of information. And so that's it. So there is no basis for you not to understand what the assignments are, what's expected of you, and then when you receive your grade, you won't have to ask me why. It's right there, and I'm repeating it to you. I follow the rubric. Now, I do run your papers through Grammarly first. If your Grammarly percentage is above 25%, which is high anyway, then I begin to deduct. Let's say, for example, I'll deduct 25% of your grade, or 1/4 of your grade. That means you'll get 3/4 of your grade in there. And then, of course, if it doesn't satisfy the other requirements, you might lose even more points. So the point of the matter is this, is I start with Grammarly. And Grammarly doesn't really want too much affect the course project, but it might affect your written assignment for the weeks. Okay. So now you can go back after seeing what the assignments are in specific, and I've covered in detail everything that you need to do. So now let's go to the actual module, and we'll discuss from this particular point. All right. So, what's our objectives for the week? What are we dealing with? Basic goals of sentencing, the difference between determinate and indeterminate sentencing, explain mandatory sentence, truth in sentencing, and sentencing guidelines. Some of this stuff is covered in your book as well. You got to read the chapter. You got to read it. And again, it gives the assignments. We're going to spend time dealing with sentencing issues and definitions in just a few minutes. I've already gone over the written assignment, your discussions, and the course project. So everybody should be clear. One student asked me, do I present a hypothetical? I said, no. You're going to do an agency, because this selection of this agency and contact person is going to determine what you're going to do your project on. Now, I had one student tell me that dealing with the issue of halfway houses, that they run into a privacy problem. I warn students about that all the time. So I told that student the same thing I'm going to say now, is you might have to select another type of agency. One of the common things that people do is ride-alongs. Another one that commonly students do is they go to court and observe, or they'll talk to a parole officer or a probation officer, one or the other, to get an idea. They may visit a jail or a prison and talk to someone who works at a prison. I have a young lady that is on our advisory board, former student of mine. She's a major in the Illinois Department of Corrections, focusing at Stateville, but she's helped and worked with a number of my students to help them get an interview and the project done, because that I already told you that's another phase of the project that's come up pretty soon. There's only 4 parts. There's week 2, I think it's week 4, I think it's week 6, I might be wrong, but anyway, there's only 4 parts to it. And you'll see each of those as laid out. We covered that during the open house as well. Okay. So let's talk about sentencing. Now, as many of you have said, or some of you have said, that one of the concepts that sentencing is built upon is deterrence. Now, it is believed that if a person is incarcerated for committing an offense, that it will deter them in the future from committing a crime again. Because if they get caught again, they're going to get punished again and probably get a longer possible sentence. But it doesn't really work so well. And individuals still consider committing crimes. It was once said that the death penalty was a deterrent factor. Statistically, it is not, because the only one that it deters is the individual who is executed, but it doesn't deter other people as it. So the key thing with deterrence is that the result of sentencing should be to make that person think twice about doing something else. That doesn't necessarily work very well. Some believe in incapacitation, the act of prisoning or isolating an individual would assist in crime prevention, so that the longer that they're locked up, then the less likely that they will commit an offense. And it says here clearly, it does assist the time period that the person is incarcerated. Yeah, of course, because they're not going to commit crime while they're incarcerated. However, research shows that incapacitation does not reduce recidivism. Recidivism is a term that says that an individual commits a repeated criminal offense, or we use those as repeat offenders or recidivists. So the point here is that incapacitation may stop the person while they're in prison, but when they get out, it doesn't take them in another direction. It's been demonstrated that they'll act right while they're in custody, and when they get out, go back and do the same thing or something worse. There are also, which is not mentioned here, rehabilitation. Now, rehabilitation is the philosophy that many of you have stated, and to be honest with you, and you don't have to go with it because of what I'm getting ready to say, it is my choice, and my reason for rehabilitation is because when you rehab something, you rebuild it, you redirect it, and you give individuals opportunities which give them something else to do in life when they get out, such as maybe they gather some education, a trade, or an opportunity to have a job. You help them with housing. But education is by far the best. I have always said many times it's cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. But then some people say, well, everybody can't be rehabilitated. No one's disagreeing with that statement. But what it is that it has been demonstrated statistically that those individuals who have been rehabilitated have been rebuilt and operated the way that the direction gives them. It's like this. If you have in your computer a chip, which you do, that controls the processing of the data in your computer. So what is in that computer is based upon the data that's in that chip that will process the information out. Well, it's the same thing what we put into individuals while they're incarcerated. It's not just teaching them a lesson, but redirecting their thought processes. You will find that there are many people who commit crimes, have a number of reasons. Drugs. Number one of the big reasons, I teach a course on drugs and crime, and I'll be teaching that in the second term of the spring quarter coming up. And statistically, you will find that there are so many individuals who commit offenses who have drug issues, and that if they were treated for that, then they would be rehabilitated, and then they wouldn't commit the crimes. Why they commit the crimes? So that they can get the funds to support their habit. And so they're prisoners of what the drug does in terms of controlling their bodies. So, and then there's also other theories that are involved here, and one of the theories is involves I'm drawing a blank on it. Requiring that an individual pay someone back, and though that individual doesn't necessarily learn from it, but what they do, it's a penalty. The key thing is this: is that again, and you know, people says, oh, you got to pay you got to pay for the crime that you committed. Sure you do. But here's the deal, people. No one goes into the penitentiary in most criminal cases for life. There are some that do, but most don't. And they're going to be released back into society. So I think that it would best serve society if those individuals are not just taught a lesson from being held over a long period of time, but given a redirection so that when they come out, they won't pick up where they left off, which would result in a repeat offender and a recidivist. So now we get to the point of the philosophy of punishment based on the various sentencing options. And judges are the ones who impose the sentences, and usually the sentences are laid out before the judges by the legislatures. And there are two general philosophies. There's what we call indeterminate sentencing. And with indeterminate sentencing, that means that the individual can have a situation where the judge has the authority to give a wide range of sentences to an individual, which means that the judge has more leeway and more control. And in indeterminate sentencing, individuals are oftentimes released earlier than they would under the latter, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Now, determinate sentencing, on the other hand, is where the parameters are set out. For example, if you commit the crime, the statute might say that you will receive a range from, let's say, 6 to 30. So that means the judge can sentence you to 6, which is on the low side, usually individuals who commit a first offense, to a term of 30 or anything above 6. The point of the matter is that the judge can't go under 6, can't go above 30. So, and usually in determinate sentencing, there is a mandatory requirement that individuals serve a percentage of their sentence before they qualify for parole or early release or mandatory supervised release as is used in Illinois. So I will say that many states have gone from indeterminate to determinate. I participated in 1977 in Illinois in doing research as for my senior paper before I graduated from law school concerning a law in Illinois called House Bill 1500. In House Bill 1500, that was the first major change in the Illinois Criminal Code since 1961. And so as a result of that, one of the issues that we dealt with was sentencing. And we came up with crimes such as Class X, which I mentioned 6 to 30, that's the range that existed. That meant that these certain offenses that would fall under the category of Class X crimes, your sentence could be a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 30. And there was a period in there written where you could only be released after serving a certain period of time. Excuse me. Then we developed what's called the Habitual Offenders Act, which came about saying that, or some refer to it as the 3 strikes law, and it has to be 3 violent offenses. Some jurisdictions use 3 strikes, and they don't have to be violent offenses, which I think is unfair. But the point of the matter is that determinate sentencing sets out the parameters specifically that the judge, and it takes it away from the prosecutor. Now, the way the prosecutor can change the sentencing is to reduce the charges. So if the charges that they're going to find you guilty of based on either a plea or either based upon them recognizing that the evidence that they have, they may not be able to find you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of a certain offense, they'll put alternate charges in an indictment so that if you're not found guilty of murder, you could be found guilty of manslaughter or so forth and so on, so that the lesser included offense is also involved. So if you are found guilty of the lesser included offense, you get the sentence commensurate with the offense that you are found guilty or plead guilty to. So Illinois is now a determinate sentencing state. I'm giving some of you guys that are in Illinois a little tip, but you will discover, you got to do the research and go and find it. But there are some states that I've seen students that argue that they have a blend. Well, I'm not saying that that's true because it's not. Some will explain why they changed it to determinate from indeterminate, or why they went determinate or indeterminate. Usually the most liberal states go with indeterminate sentencing. The most conservative states go with determinate sentencing. And so, but there's a debate about which one is better. So again, as I said, sentencing guidelines limit the judge's discretion, particularly when those guidelines include presumptive sentencing, as I've talked about, that pretty much you find under determinate as opposed to indeterminate sentencing. So the judge's discretion can be limited by mandatory minimum sentence, which I said, if your minimum is a certain, they can't go below that unless the offense that you're charged with is lowered by the prosecution. The judge can't lower the charge. It's up to the prosecution. So that's how sentencing issues operate, and you're going to find that in every jurisdiction that you're in. So let's spend some time here talking about some of the definitions of sentencing, and then we're going to adjourn. So what is general deterrence? If you go through here and do this little exercise, which I'm going to do with you guys here, it says uses punishment to prevent others from committing crimes. The idea that severely punishing the convict will deter others who are contemplating criminal acts. I already told you that in reality, it doesn't really operate very well. There are debates about it, though. Specific deterrent. Now, that was general. Here's the difference in that. Here it is. It's basically the same. Focuses on the individual. The offender should learn that crime does not pay as a result of a harsh penalty. But once again, anything with deterrence involved, whether it's specific or general, it's still problematic as far as the individual coming out. Again, it's like, what I'd put it like this is, you stop them from committing crime during the period they're incarcerated, but when they're released, there's nothing to stop them. They will return back because they haven't been given anything in its place. So they'll pick up either where they left off or either get into a worse offense. Incapacitation. Physically restraining or isolating offenders to protect society. Some, are actually put in solitary confinement. And then there are also situations when individuals who are offenders have to be segregated for their protection as well, such as sex offenders, such as individuals who were former law enforcement or police officers who end up being incarcerated. They have to do that. But anyway, the point of physically restraining someone is to make them, is to impose even more thinking on their parts. Once again, my philosophy and position on that, with the years that I've seen from being a lawyer, being a police officer, and working with criminals for many, many years, is that it frustrates them. It makes them angry. And there's nothing worse than releasing angry individual back into society again, and because they don't even think. They're more concerned about what was taken away from them. Selective incapacitation. Again, repeat offenders, longer prison terms. Again, the point of the matter is that you commit a crime, you come back, you commit another crime, you get longer time. So instead of getting 6, you might get 10, and so forth and so on, depending on the offense that you commit. If you're dealing with 6 to 30, the point of the matter is that the sentences get longer. Once again, not really beneficial. I will say this to you, that it is quite clear that individuals learn quite a bit about crime when they're incarcerated, because they'll have people in there that are lifers or there who are going to be on longer periods of time than they are, and will develop the habits that they have while they're in there. And so the longer in there, the more of those habits they develop, so that when they're released, they will go from being a person who committed a crime for whatever reason to what I call a hardcore criminal who just makes it a way of life. So I'm saying that prison is a place that can make you worse and not better as an individual. Yet, I'm not saying that people shouldn't go there for committing crimes, but I'm saying that while there, we should be trying to reverse the direction that they were in when they went in. Because what happens is when you're in there, you get counseling, you have exposure to um, um, the records and information as to why you're there. There are individuals who talk to you, social workers, to try to redirect you in terms of your life. But to give you specifics, like while you're in there, get you some education. Knowledge is power, and you will begin to go in another direction. Of course, then, if you have a drug issue, you can get all the knowledge and education you want, but unless you address that issue of the treatment, same with mental health. Oh, gosh, that's a huge area as well. Addressing that issue while the person's incarcerated as well. Rehabilitation, my all-time favorite. It means what it says. The root word is rehabilitate, and what that means is what it says: changing an offender's behavior, attitude, beliefs, or character to diminish harsher criminal penalties. In other words, pointing them in another direction. I remind people you need to go into a 180, not a 360. A 360 will put you right back where you started if you want to look at a circle. You don't need to do a 90 because I always say this, and I say this in church. A 90 lets you see where the bad stuff and then lets you see the good stuff. Well, if you make that other 90 degrees and turn to 180, then you're going to be facing the opposite direction, and hopefully your things that you do in life will be the opposite of what you did that caused you to be incarcerated. That's what rehabilitation is. And, you know, I don't think that we should do away with rehabilitation because everybody's not rehabilitated. I still think that, again, it cuts into the repeat offender or recidivist rate in the law. Just desserts means just what it says. Means you get what's coming to you. Punishment that is saying that the seriousness of the offense or harm done. So that means you get what you're coming. So it's like the Bible talks about sowing and reaping, or either I've heard many people say what goes around comes around. In other words, try to get you as much of the punishment as you can. Some things we will not do, like in some jurisdictions, if a person rapes, they'll castrate them. If a person commits theft or something like that, they'll cut off the hands and those kinds of things. And, you know, the point of the matter is that you had it coming to you. That's pretty much what it's saying. And so, again, I already got to talking to the point about punishment. Again, when you punish a person, that individual is not very happy when they come out of punishment. And like I said again, their state and direction and thought process is more toward anger than towards being calm and being able to move away and leave that situation alone. Restorative justice. Repairing the harm done. So what the person does is they may do community service, or they may pay restitution. That was what I was thinking of early, something along those lines. That can be a part of any rehabilitation as well. So the point of the matter is trying to repair the harm that's done. But there are some crimes that you can't do that with, but the offender, where they make amends for the harm, like theft and those kind of situations, that's when that usually falls into place. But violent offenses, kind of hard to deal with repairing the harm done or make amends to or loss to the victim or the community. But community service is one of the popular ways that that's demonstrated, and that works. That works pretty well too, as well. I know of a situation of a guy who committed a hate crime against an African American, and the judge sentenced that individual to community service. And in the community service, he told them that they'd go to work with the NAACP. So what he was doing was pointing that individual to a situation to learn more about people, and then to attempt to desensitize that individual from the violence that they committed based on race. But that can happen in another. Now, so a person who commits rape, you're not going to put them in a home for women, and you're certainly not going to take a pedophile and put them in a school. But you know what I'm talking about when we get to the point that community service operates. Benefits society. There are people who have worked in my church, for example, who needed to do so many community service hours. Equity goal of punishment. Very simply, offenders pay back for their loss. Again, that's akin to restitution. The justice system for the cost of processing their case. So in other words, they pay back the court costs and society for disruptions because of the crimes that they committed. So that's what we're talking about when we get into the equity goal of punishment. And that's built into sometimes in rehabilitation as well, so that they try to make the party whole again that they harmed from their crime. Concurrent sentence. A concurrent sentence means just what it says. A person's convicted of 2 or more crimes. You got to be convicted of 2 or more crimes in order to have concurrent. Begin to serve on the same day that the sentence is, based on the longest running serve. I'll give you an example. My mom, who adopted me and raised me, was the victim in 1971 of a shooting, and a person with her died. Well, as a result of that, it was reported that that individual got 120 years. But really what they got was 30 years term for each of the offenses that they found him guilty of. Murder, attempted murder, and I don't remember what the other 2 were. But anyway, the point of the matter is so each day that person served one part of the next sentence. So it was basically not 120, it was basically 30, because one part of each day they served a part of the other charges. And so that meant that in this case, because we had good time, which good time is pretty much done away with in most jurisdictions, which meant that a person, and I talked about that in my open house, that the individual found themselves where they were involved with a good time. So that their sentence, so 30 meant 15. So that person could serve 15 years. But anyway, a concurrent sentence is where they're serving part of the same sentence each day, okay? And it's really there's not. But then we come to the next one, which is consecutive. It means just what it says. When you finish one sentence, you start the other. So when the first one is completed, that means that, so let's say, for example, if that person got 120 years consecutive, 4 30-year terms, that meant that after they finished the 30-year term that they did for the first one, then they would start the second one. And after they finished the second one, they start the third one and the fourth one. And that meant more in terms of time. So we have more consecutive sentencing now than we did back when I came out of law school in 1978. Determinate sentencing, we've been talking about that. A fixed term, the maximum established by law and legislature. That's what I was talking about. Indeterminate sentencing is early release from a correctional facility after the offender serves a required minimum portion of their sentence. And like I said again, jurisdictions that have the fixed rate or determinate sentence don't operate like this. Sentencing guidelines are very simply the method by which we determine how a person is sentenced and utilize that individual's background. One of the things that's prepared in a case where you plead or you're found guilty is what we call a PSI, or a pre-sentence investigation, where all of your background is brought before the court. The probation department usually prepares that, and it's submitted to the defense, to the prosecution, and also to the judge as well. Presumptive sentencing guidelines is what it says. The legislature sets the penalties for criminal acts as well. It's pretty much following the same as determinate there. Mandatory minimum sentences, which means the judge can't go under the sentence, the number of years. As I said, if it says 6 is a minimum, you can't go 5. You can't go anything under 6 as the sentence goes. 3 strikes law, Habitual Offenders Act, I talked about that. And what happens in a situation like that is that they receive longer sentences with no parole for a 3rd or more felony. And like I said again, generally it's considered as a violent offense as opposed to a non-violent offense. So 3 strikes is just like baseball. 3 strikes and you're out. And so you're gone for a longer period of time. Truth in sentencing means very simply this. It means offenders serve big portions of their sentence to reduce discrepancy between the sentence and the actual time served. So what it means is that if it says 10, it's going to be closer to 10 than to 5 or 4. It's going to be right at it. And again, there's a percentage that's usually determined that you serve before you qualify for any kind of release in a situation like that. And that's the end of that. So if you looked at each of those, you understood the concepts about what we're dealing with here. Okay. So that's and again, just before, I'm just going to just do this just to show you again one last time. I'm not going to do it no more weeks. I'm going to show you again the lesson content for week 1 that is I covered in detail concerning the project. Again, I said the assignments are week 2. That's where we are right now. You won't have one next week, but don't wait till week 4. Your agency overview and background. 7, your interview report, and then your final paper is due. And then, of course, all of the details and questions and all of that is covered here, and I'm not going to go over that, but that's where you will find it again. All right, so that's why I said the open house is very, very critical in helping you to make sure that you have the information that's necessary to complete the assignments properly. And again, I stress the importance of the rubrics. So that's about it. If you have any questions, you can type that in the chat box. And if I don't see any in the next few seconds, I'm going to presume that everybody understands everything. I say this to you. I am never guilty of not um, uh, breaking it down. Okay, no questions from you. All right. And I'm not guilty of rushing over the material. Thank you. I try to do what I need to do to reach the clear understanding. Um, and I'm one of the professors that will spend a lot of time to make sure at the beginning that you get it. And then I will double you back to my lectures and say, I give you a lot of details and make sure that you follow those details. And you want to get an A in the course, you'll do that. All right. So with that, I'm going to, it's about 9:21. I'm going to adjourn this section. I told everybody that it doesn't always last an hour. I told you that first week would be longer because of what I did, but all the rest of them will be 45 minutes, sometime to an hour. So with that, I'm going to terminate the meeting. I'll see you guys in week 4. Boy, just think about it. By the time you come to the next lecture, it's going to be week 4. Then you only have 7 more weeks. And if you have questions during the course of the week, you already know how to reach me. I told you on the course homepage. You can email me, text me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. Thank you. Good night to you as well, Sean. So good night to you guys, and have a great week. And I will see you in a couple of weeks. Good night.